All right, Austin, and we've brought in a panel tonight to discuss what we saw during the presidential debate tonight. We have four locals joining us live with their reaction to tonight's debate. We have political analysts Ivy Cargyle from California State University, Bakersfield, Richard Allen Bowler from Bakersfield College. Representing the Democratic Party, we have Robin Walters, and Matthew Martin is representing the Republican Party. I want to turn now and thank you all for joining us tonight. Thank you so much for coming in. I want to dive right in. It was a lively debate tonight for the first presidential debate, and I want to start with Robin and Matthew. First, briefly, how do you think your respective candidates did tonight? Robin, we'll have you start.
You know what? I was really happy with how he did. Did really well. He maintained class. He was not the chief interrupter. It was, in my view, a debate between the playground bully and the kid that everybody likes. And he was back to a normal presidential debate, actually talking issues, actually talking facts.
And Matthew,
we'll have you go next.
Well, of course, I strongly disagree with that. What we saw, you call him a playground bully, but he's a incredible commander-in-chief, and that was in contrast to a 47-year bureaucrat who had so many years, 37 years in the U.S. Senate, 8 years as vice president to get his agenda done. The president set forth his plans, what he's done so far. Again, I think he contrasted very clearly his response to COVID, shutting down before anybody else did, when in fact the former vice president said that was xenophobic and racist and other things. He did a great job talking about where he's been, 7 million new jobs created, and where we have to go to get back on track after this pandemic.
And now both candidates, of course, as we saw tonight, spoke over one another throughout the evening. Now, do you think that helped or hurt each candidate? And Matthew, we're going to start with you on that one.
Well, I think that first, you had a moderator who was very clearly one-sided in allowing Joe Biden to have more response time and rebuttal time. But absolutely, both sides need to be able to get their message out. I think they both struggled a little bit with that tonight. But we're talking about America's future. And so that's critical, and it's very passionate, a lot of passion on both sides.
And Robin?
I think it's clear. Well, I mean, I'm not surprised that a Trump supporter would, of course, blame someone from Fox News who was trying to get Trump to play by the rules that he agreed to, and he couldn't do it. He not only interrupted, and so many times that the moderator had to try and take it back and had to cut him off. It was the one time I think everybody in the United States wished that debate was on Zoom so they could have put him on mute.
Now, I want to also bring up with Ivy and Richard, do you think that there was a clear winner tonight, and why or why not? Ivy, we'll have you start that one.
I actually think that throughout the entire evening, both candidates were able to they were both able to make points, and they both lost ground where they should have made points and they didn't make points. I think more than anything, I feel like the American public is really the one that lost out because we just didn't get to hear real, clear, concrete positions on policy issues, especially right now when we are in a global pandemic and in an economic downturn. So to say who won the night, I think really what we need to be talking about is the sad reality that the American public lost.
And Alan, what about you?
Yeah, I kind of agree with Dr. Cargyle. I thought it really wasn't a well-moderated debate, in my opinion. I didn't feel that either side came out, with, you didn't come away with this feeling that either side was doing things exactly the way they wanted. If I had to score it, I would probably say that I thought Biden did better, especially since he came in kind of winning or ahead in the polls. And I don't think the debate's going to change that.
Now, do you think any of the voters were swayed one way or the other? And we'll start with you, Ivy, once again.
I think right now we are in very polarized times, and this is a very polarized election. I think people, given that in some states people are already starting to vote, I think people are already, most people have already made their decision. According to national polls, there's about anywhere between 3 to 11% of voters who are still undecided. I don't think that tonight's debate really helped too many people make a decision other than probably just walking away feeling frustrated that they didn't get to hear a lot of concrete policy positions because there was just so much, was so much fighting and there was so much shouting over one another. So my hope is that for the next debates, the moderators are able to better help the candidates get out their policy positions so that, you know, for those 3 to 11% that need to still make a decision, they can. Because I think for the most part, though, majority of voters already know where they're at.
And I do want to definitely get into future debates after a few more questions. But Matthew, I'll have you weigh in on that same question. Do you think voters were swayed one way or the other?
Well, I don't think on this debate. I think that we have a few more debates here, and but I agree there was a lot of interrupting on both sides, and I don't think so. You know, but the president's record has been very clear, and I think when he was able to speak, he did get some of that information out to the voters who are, you know, working hard trying to put food on the table and maybe have not been paying attention to this election before now.
Robin, do you believe voters were swayed one way or the other?
I would agree that there's not that many voters that really are undecided at this point. I think Biden was able to talk about some of the policy issues, specifically on the economy, on climate change, and also on COVID-19 in particular, and really address some issues that I think are facing the people that are undecided. For example, mask wearing, a simple thing like that Trump couldn't even say, wear a mask, even though everyone knows that we need to wear a mask, even though everyone knows climate change is real. He could not say that. And finally, I think the one thing that people are really, and I hope they really focus on, is he said he would not commit to the integrity of our elections, even though every single expert has said the ballots are valid, mail-in ballots are valid, and he would not commit to a peaceful transition of power. And I think that is really key, because people want normalcy and civility back. So I agree with all of them that this debate in some ways really is disappointing to the American people, that we have to have a moderator that really is like more of a referee.
And I want to shift into that. There were several topics discussed tonight: the Supreme Court, COVID, the economy, global warming, and more. How do you think the candidates did as far as addressing those topics? Mr. Bowler, we'll start with you.
Not that well, to be honest. I mean, it's a tough format. You've got like an hour and a half, a little bit less maybe, to address a whole plethora of issues. And both of them are kind of vying for time, and they're dealing with interruptions. And so I think there were times when they were able to address issues, but I don't think I think really they did need some kind of almost a mute on the other person's microphone while the person was trying to talk, so that they could actually address the issues. I think it was hard for the American people to probably get a sense of where they stood.
And Mr. Martin, how do you think the president did as far as addressing those topics?
Well, I think he did very well. Look, this president just a few weeks ago signed the largest preservation of land. So, you know, obviously he supports the environment. When you look at the numbers, you know, Joe Biden was quick to say that he would be fine with hacking the Supreme Court, which is something that FDR did years ago. 17 out of the 19 last times a Supreme Court justice opening has come up on election year, they've been nominated. And of the 17 times that it passed, because the president and the Senate share the same party, you know, between them. So I think he did a very good job. You know, Joe Biden, on the other hand, saying that he was going to defund the police, he was okay with that. These are serious issues that the American people care about. We have cities burning to the ground. We have people trying to work hard, make a living, and live their life peacefully. We have a president of a major political party tonight say he's okay with defunding. So I think the president did a good job bringing up the differences, right, between the two parties today.
Ms. Cargile?
So I think that going back to Mr. Boulder's point, it is a short amount of time that these candidates have. You know, this is where it's a challenge, because for those of us that have been watching and that watch the elections and that watch the presidents, we know what the record is, and so there's not much convincing that we need. But for the average voter who has to work, for the average voter who right now is really hard up on economic times because Congress couldn't get a deal passed in terms of a second HEALS Act, I think this is that important moment where they should be getting the information that they need in regards to making that decision. And so I think that, unfortunately, they're just, all the interruptions just didn't allow for the issues to really, for the candidates to really come out on the issues. And yes, Mr. Martin is right. The president does have a track record, and for some people that track record doesn't sit well. Just like with Vice President Biden, it is also very much the case that he has come out in support of some things and not in support of others. So I think there were those few times, like when talking about climate change, where you did get to hear some information about what the candidates think about. So I thought that was good, especially given how intense and how unfortunate the wildfires are here in California. So I think there were those moments where some issues did get debated. The Affordable Health Care Act, we did get to hear a little bit on that. But overall, it is hard to be able to really learn a lot from these candidates on this kind of a stage. So I'm really hoping that moderators for the next debates are able to provide more time, provide a better format, so that we don't have all of that sparring back and forth, so that we can get more information across. So some issues did work, others not so much.
Right. Now, at the end of the debate, one of the other topics they brought up, of course, were their records, as you just touched on momentarily there. Now, the president saying in part that his administration has done more in 3.5 years than any other administration. Vice President Joe Biden saying we've become weaker, sicker, poorer, and more divided since President Trump has been in. I'd like to hear all of your reactions to that. Robin, we'll start with you.
I thought it was really powerful. The difference is Joe Biden had the truth behind him. We know that at the end of the Obama presidency, we had more jobs and a greater recovery than we've ever had. And now we have lost, 7 million jobs. So in terms of the impact of COVID, and a lot of that is because the mishandling of COVID. And so it was important, I think, that Joe Biden talked about the fact that Trump knew about COVID back in January and February, did nothing, said it's a miracle, it'll just disappear. And here we are still struggling in our economy. I think South Dakota just is about to close down again because they called it a hoax, or they're not wearing masks. I see even people at some of the parties here perhaps not wearing masks. That's why we can't get back to normal. So for those of us that are working, and so many people on the front lines, it is a serious issue. And so I think that is the difference between a Biden presidency and continuing the Trump presidency.
Mr. Martin.
Well, look, from the very gate here, the president did an outstanding job. You have Joe Biden. We hear Democrats say this a lot. The record under Obama, this and that, 7 million brand new jobs created under this administration, under the leadership of President Trump. Incredible job growth, biggest gains in the stock market we've ever seen. And you can't blame the loss of jobs due to COVID-19 on President Trump. Again, he shut down the border to China and other countries, and the Democratic Party, the establishment, and Joe Biden said he was racist, he was xenophobic. What he did was he made a tough decision. That's what a commander-in-chief does. When a pandemic comes up, when something happens, you got to act. And that's what he did. And all of a sudden, it's his fault that we had the pandemic and some folks have lost their jobs. He jumped into gear. There's been another bill in front of Congress to pass additional funding and additional resources to those affected by the virus, and Pelosi won't bring it to a floor vote. The president acted swiftly and quickly for the American people, and his job record of 7 million new jobs in this country stands for itself. And one other thing, 5% growth. When you look at Trump's first 3.5 years in office, 5% wage growth across the board. When you look at Barack Obama's record, in 8 years, only 4.2% growth. So by that rate, he'll more than double again at the end of his second term what Obama did in his entire 8 years. And we're just we're not even into year 4. So he did a great job. And the contrast in blaming the pandemic on the president of the United States and the economic downturn since then is just plain wrong. It's plain politics, and it's not accurate.
And I want to ask Mr. Buller and Ms. Cargile as well. That question also with the records was also about why people should vote for them as president. What do you both think about their responses to that question?
Who would you like to start?
Mr. Buller, go ahead.
I apologize.
Okay. I think probably this has kind of already been said, but the truth is that most people have probably already made up their mind. Most of the people will not be learning the records from the debates. They'll be learning the records from the newspapers they read, the television shows they watch, the neighbors they talk to, the churches they go to. these are things that they're going to get communicated to them through many different sources of information. And the debates are going to help, they can help a bit, but the records are things, they both have records now. We have an incumbent and we have a vice president, running who's got a record. So I think they both have pretty well established records. And I don't think the debates in a way were at least as necessary that way. I didn't think it was a great debate, but hopefully people know enough about the candidates already that it doesn't matter.
Ms. Cargo.
So I think that, in regards to why people should vote for them, I think the records are going to speak for themselves. I think what Mr. Boulder said is accurate in that the coverage and the conversation, the national conversation that is occurring now and that is going to be occurring in the days to come regarding how people did and people's impressions, I think are going to matter in regards to helping those people who haven't decided make a decision or start to make a decision for themselves. I think it's also important to consider the fact that people are probably going to ask themselves that proverbial question in American politics, right? Am I better off right now than I was 4 years ago? And given that global pandemic and given the economic downturn, I'm really curious to see how people, what people feel. I think that the pandemic is important. I think that the economy is important, and who's in the leadership at the time that all of this is happening really does matter. It does taint their record if it's not handled in the correct way, which a lot of Americans seem to feel because of the fact that there's a possibility we'll have to shut down again because the virus isn't under control and we don't have a vaccine. The other thing to consider is the fact that there are other issues that the country is suffering from, and going back to a point that was made earlier, I think a lot of Americans are really ready for some sense of normalcy. We're not going to be able to go back to a U.S. that was the U.S. that we had before the racial reckoning that we're facing right now. We're not going to go back to a United States that was the way that it was before the pandemic. But people want some sense of stability, and I think that the record of the current leadership is going to play a role, and the record of the vice president when he was vice president is also going to play a role in regards to helping people decide, in addition to giving the conversations and the information that people are going to get from their peers and their family members, and just watching the shows and the news that they watch.
And I want to ask now, since we've touched on it quite a few times, I want to go around just very quickly and ask, what is one thing you would change for the next debate to make sure that you get the information you want from the candidates? We'll start with you, Mr. Martin.
Oh, I think that you could have a panel of moderators perhaps, and from both political ideologies, and both could ask questions, right? So instead of saying he's more this way or he's more that way, have one or two moderators that both get to ask a few questions, and nobody gets to interrupt anybody. And so you really have to enforce that and allow the American people to hear what their message is and the direction they want to take the country. And it's again, there's a passion on both sides. A lot of people that as Americans, we love this country, so we have to give both sides the opportunity to say this is our record, this is what we want to do, and then it's the voters' decision to make that vote on election day.
Ms. Walters, changes for future debates?
One thing think you need is essential is a fact checker. It's really easy to debate someone who you win a debate if all you do is you tell the biggest lie with the straightest face. And unless you have a fact checker and a moderator who is willing to fact check, and probably more than one moderator, I would agree, it's not really a debate because no one is checking and making sure that the people who are debating are telling the truth. And so I think not only do you need fact checkers, you may need a mute button.
Mr. Bowler.
Yeah, I agree. I think something like a mute button would be very good. I think fact checker is an interesting idea. I think it would be incredibly hard to do live, but I mean, there are various organizations, news organizations that I think have outside fact checking. Yeah, if you could just allow them to really talk uninterrupted, I think that would be a blessing.
And Ms. Cargo.
I have to agree with everything that's been said. But honestly, the whole time that I was watching the debate, I was just thinking somebody needs to mute the mic. Somebody needs to mute the mic. So in all honesty, we need a mute button so that the other side can also get their explanation and get their answer out, for purposes of being able to gain some clarity, for those voters that still that are still on the fence about which way they're going to go. So I say the mute button.
All right. And again, we have political analysts Ivy Cargyle and Richard Allen Bowler, Robin Walters with the Democratic Party, Matthew Martin with the Republican Party. Thank you all very much for joining us tonight. We appreciate your time. And of course, our conversation and our coverage does continue tonight.